Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome. It's an Open Line Friday here on the Eric Erickson Show. Glad to have you with me coast to coast. The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you want to be on, if you text the word engage to 33777, you can get a ticket for the gathering. We now have confirmed Mike Pence, former vice president, Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, Doug Ducey, former governor of Arizona, Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, Kat Cammack, the congresswoman from Florida, and a good number of others. David McCormick, the candidate for Senate in Pennsylvania, is going to be there. You can be there as well. You can text engage to 33777, happening August 8th through the 11th in Atlanta. Text engage to 33777. When I begin the show every day as part of show prep, it is my obligation, I think, to you is what's the biggest story? What is the biggest story? Arguably, the Hunter Biden story is the biggest story, the trial, the prosecution is arrested, or maybe it's Joe Biden in Europe, maybe it's Donald Trump on the campaign trail. Y'all, there is a story that I think is the biggest story that no one is paying attention to. And Charlie, we may have to put this in the See, I Told You So file, and I hope we never have to replay the audio because I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. All you have to do is understand the motivations of what's going on around the world. And I need to begin with Africa. We're not talking about Africa. We're talking about something else, and I need you to stay with me. Let me paint broadly. Around the world, there is a growing axis between China, Russia, Iran, and their allied partners. Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, an axis of evil, although there are a lot of isolationists in this country who don't like it when you say that because it brings back memories of the war in Iraq. But there is an Eastern axis, you can call it, shaping up. And one of the things they're doing is they're setting fires around the world to stretch American resources. So consider Africa. In the Sahel, there has been that is the plains of Africa that are south of the Sahara Desert. There have been a series of military coups across that region, stretching from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean. And those coups, we know for certain, have been backed by the Wagner Group out of Russia. So, for example, Niger has now thrown the United States out of a long-held military base in the Sahara in northern Niger. The Russians have moved in to take over that base. That base was designed to be able to get to centers of Islamic extremism rapidly to shut down terrorist attacks. And across the Sahel, the Islamic terrorists have been attacking. Now, you should understand, China, Russia, Iran, they're not fans of the Islamic terrorists. The Islamic terrorists hate the Iranians because the Iranians are the wrong branch of Islam. They hate the Russians because of Russia's involvement in Chechnya. They don't like the Chinese because of Western China's treatment of Muslims, including the Uyghur population. But these Islamic extremists are useful because it ties up the United States, because above all else, the Islamic extremists hate the United States and Israel more than the others. So you throw us out of Niger, you do these series of coups in Africa, suddenly these strong men come in, they throw us out, they bring the Russians in, and the Russians do not contain the Islamic terrorists who go off to wage war against American allies and plot the United States' revenge against us. So it bogs us down. Then you have Ukraine. The Russians having gone into Ukraine, we know they're using Chinese and Iranian weapons in Ukraine. They're distracting us in Ukraine. And by the way, this is a matter of all of Europe and the United States together working, because we do know that Vladimir Putin's grand ambition is to reorder a Russian sphere of influence that includes all those countries that used to be behind the Iron Curtain. Now, let's go to Asia. If you have seen the newspapers in the last few days, the Chinese have been very antagonistic towards the Philippines, towards Taiwan, towards Vietnam. They've built a series of artificial islands in the South China Sea in shallow water. They have expanded their footprint. They're claiming as Filipino territorial water their own. They've sent the Chinese Coast Guard to harass Filipino fishermen. They encircled Taiwan last week to the extent Taiwan nearly ran out of natural gas. They've been harassing the Vietnamese so much, the Vietnamese are looking to the Americans for help, which is unusual in the least. It's got the American Navy bogged down in the South China Sea, trying to help the Filipinos, and the American Navy is helping, of all things, the communist Vietnamese. The communist Vietnamese and the communist Chinese are no longer friends. The Chinese look at them as rivals who should be in their sphere of influence. The Vietnamese look at themselves as an independent nation. They don't want to be in the sphere of influence. Now, this all gets me to where we need to focus. This is a story that on its surface is no big deal. 3 Russian Navy ships and a nuclear-powered submarine will arrive at the port of Havana for an official visit next week, the Cuban Armed Forces said in a statement Thursday, confirming the military exercises first disclosed by U.S. officials on Wednesday. The Cuban Revolutionary Armed Forces said it'll be a Russian missile frigate, nuclear submarine, oil tanker, and salvage tug. They'll arrive June 12th and stay for a week. The Cuban military said the visit by the Russian Navy ships is part of a friendly relationship between the two countries, complies with international law, and does not pose a security threat to the region because none of the ships will be carrying nuclear weapons. Do we believe them? That in and of itself is not extraordinary. This is not a situation like the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Russians have visited the port of Havana several times, but this is coming while something is happening that no one seems to be paying attention to. This is from CNN from the middle of May 14th. Venezuela continues to build up military infrastructure and hardware close to the border with Guyana, and President Nicolas Maduro and his supporters scale up their threats to annex an oil-rich piece of Guyanese land. In a report shared with CNN, the Washington-based think tank Center for Strategic and International Studies warns that while the Venezuelan government has little to gain and much to lose from a full-blown conflict, it continues to play a dangerous game over its claim over the densely forested Essequibo region. The constant drumbeat asserting the Essequibo is ours, alongside the creation of new military commands and legal structures to oversee the defense of the region, is helping to institutionalize a sense of perpetual pre-war footing, it wrote. Tension over the region, which amounts to about 2/3 of Guyanese national territory, mounted last year after a Venezuelan referendum in which voters assented to creating a Venezuelan state within the disputed region. Guyana had called the move a step towards annexation and an existential threat as the specter of armed conflict loomed over the region. Now, there's a huge piece of land in Guyana that has a lot of oil under it, and American oil companies Hess, Exxon, and Chevron have been exploring it. In fact, there's a deal between Chevron and Hess to merge. Exxon is opposing the deal now and putting it in arbitration because Exxon wants this region for itself and wants to obstruct the Hess-Chevron merger because Exxon, which has ties as well to a Chinese oil conglomerate in this operating region, wants the oil. Anacoco Island, there's a military base that the Venezuelans have. It's in a river. And they've been building up their military. And guess who's there? Do you have any idea who is at Anacoco Island according to the private intelligence operations of the oil companies? The Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranian Revolutionary National Guard, Quds forces. This comes from private sector military intelligence operations. The oil companies in areas like South America have their own intelligence operations for their safety and security, and they're warning everyone the Iranians are there, the Russians are there, and the Chinese are there. Not making this up. The Russians, Chinese, and Iranians are training the Venezuelan military, which has engaged in a massive military buildup on the border of Guyana to take an oil-rich section of land that American oil companies have the rights to. So right now, Joe Biden has authorized Venezuela to sell oil on the open market, along with turning a blind eye to Iran. Venezuela is now getting the money from what Joe Biden has allowed them to do, and Iran is getting the money from what Joe Biden has allowed them to do. Iran is turning its money towards terrorism. Venezuela is turning its money to its military. Venezuela is building up its military with the sale of oil that Joe Biden authorized, so that it, with the training from the Russians, Iranians, and Chinese, can invade an oil-rich section of Guyana where American oil companies have the rights and access to the oil, where if the American oil companies get the oil, guess who it benefits? Us. This is from CNN. 2 Iranian-built PACAP-3 fast missile boats have been seen at Venezuelan small Coast Guard station at Punta Barima, placing Venezuelan military and naval forces within arm's reach of the Guyana-administered Essequibo. It's just 40 miles from the Guyanese border. The Chinese, the Russians, and the Iranians working together in their eastern axis have been setting a series of fires around the world to distract the United States. You bog down the United States in South America and in Africa and in the Middle East and in Europe. Who's to watch Guam? Who's to watch Midway Island? Who's to watch the Philippines? You tie us down around the world, taxing our resources because the American military has been scaled back under Barack Obama. Remember, Barack Obama made a conscious decision when he was president of the United States that the United States no longer needed to be on a war footing to be able to win 2 wars on 2 separate spheres at the same time. Since World War II, the United States decided it needed a military that could win a war in the Pacific and a war in the Atlantic at the same time. What Barack Obama's genius decided to do was scale back the American military so that it would only win one of those wars, but would have enough resources to at least draw to a standstill the war on the other until the first could be won. It's a stupid idea. The Chinese have been building military capacity to be able to win 2 wars in 2 spheres. The Russians want to dominate Europe. They need us distracted elsewhere so that they can take back Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia and move further across Ukraine. It's one reason they've wanted to tie up the Crimea. This is so obvious. They're moving chess pieces around on the board while Joe Biden is tripping over his feet and at war with the English language. The Democrats are asleep at the switch. We have Russians, Chinese, and Iranians inside Venezuela right now training their military as they prepare to invade a sovereign nation and take an oil-rich territory where it's American companies that have the oil contracts. This is happening on Joe Biden's watch. War is coming to the Western Hemisphere. It is probably not a coincidence that the Russians are sending the top of their fleet, including their bleeding-edge nuclear submarine, to Cuba this week. Wonder who they're going to be talking to in Cuba. And no one in the American press corps is paying attention to this because they're obsessed with Trump and the Trump trial. War is coming to the Western Hemisphere at the hands of our enemies as they try to degrade American sovereignty around the world. It's clear and obvious the chess pieces are being put forward on the board. Joe Biden's asleep and the media doesn't care because it has nothing to do with Donald Trump. But you should care and you should pay attention. And if I am right, and I think I am, I don't need to say I told you so, because there's going to be hell to pay when this happens, and it's going to affect the stock market. It's going to affect the global economy if Venezuela goes into this oil-rich region, which they say they're going to do as soon as the monsoon season goes away, and does so with the help of the Chinese, the Russians, and the Iranians, all of whom are there right now training the Venezuelan military, while Joe Biden does absolutely nothing except allow Venezuela to sell oil to fund its military excursions.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. The holidays are here, and you know what that means. It's time to get your friends and family the gifts they deserve. Take the stress out of shopping with Amazon's great deals and low prices on a huge range of items from toys to tech and much more. Whoever you're gifting for, Amazon has great prices on everything you need this holiday season. Shop Amazon for all your gifting needs.
Hello and welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. You can be on the program. It is an open line Friday, and I am going to go to Robert's phone call. Welcome to the show, Robert. How are you?
Doing well, Eric. Appreciate what you do very much.
Thank you.
I grew up in the 60s. I remember the missile crisis, or at least pretty much what, as my parents told me because I was small. But anyway, you know, this new axis of evil, China, Russia, Iran. So what happened to the Monroe Doctrine, that thing we used to learn about in school?
So it went out the window after World War II, largely. Americans stopped enforcing it. As the Soviet sphere moved in, Republicans have always taken it seriously. This explains kind of the Iran-Contra situation where Ronald Reagan gets slimed in the press, but he was trying to stop the communists from taking over parts of Central America. And Democrats, of course, abhor the idea of American international leadership. And you've got an increasing number of isolationists on the right as well who don't want to do it. The problem is if we don't take seriously the Monroe Doctrine and our Western sphere of influence, then we have things like what are happening right now. The Chinese, the Russians, and the Iranians. By the way, this isn't a dispute. This isn't my opinion. This is factual that the Chinese, the Russians, and the Iranians have been coordinating in Venezuela helping the military. CNN reporting that the Iranians have given Coast Guard ships to the Venezuelans in training. The Wall Street Journal reporting the Russian and Chinese involvement with the Venezuelans. This isn't me making this up. This is really happening. And now that you see a military buildup using Russian, Chinese, and Iranian equipment on the border with Guyana, you see where this is headed, particularly when you see how the Chinese, the Russians, and the Iranians have been trying to light fires around the world elsewhere. It's only a matter of time before they started in the Western Hemisphere, and Nicolas Maduro gives them an opportunity. And you will remember one of the things that Joe Biden did is he walked away from Donald Trump's very successful and uniting policies against Venezuela. He had all of Central and South America aligned against the Venezuelans. Joe Biden came in and undid that. And this is where we are. There's also the border situation. Americans for Prosperity Foundation has been taking people down to the border to show them what's happening at the border and that it's not working. Bill Malugin was on Fox yesterday saying that Joe Biden's executive order has not dented the flow of illegals across the border at all. That's why Americans for Prosperity has set up this website, secureborder.secureamerica.com, to show people that there are common sense solutions to dealing with the border. We know what they are, whether it's a border wall, physical protection, or technology in places a border wall is not a good fit, more Border Patrol agents. There are all sorts of ways we can deal with the border. You can go to secureborder.secureamerica.com today and find out those solutions. Americans for Prosperity wants to remind you what they are and then get you involved in making sure members of Congress know we know the common sense easy solutions to take care of the situation at the border. Go to secureborder.secureamerica.com. Secureborder.secureamerica.com. Brought to you by my friends at Americans for Prosperity, a great conservative think tank and do tank in Washington, D.C.
With Lululemon, the real gift happens when they're living in it. When you give them the softest loungewear set, the real gift is this. and this. And this. This holiday, Lululemon makes it easy to give a gift that goes beyond. Open the moment. Shop now at Lululemon.com.
Welcome. It's Eric Erickson here. By the way, funny thing is happening in voicemail, getting some, I would play them, but they got too much profanity in them. Some angry Venezuelan immigrants to this country saying Venezuela, it's actually their land, this territory, and Venezuela's just taking it back from Guyana. The problem here is that they're using China, Russia, and Iran to do it. And when they take it back, the American oil companies that are down there benefit us, and they're going to throw them out and give it to the Chinese to benefit the Chinese. So for those of you who are immigrants to this country, you're going to have to pick. Do you want Venezuela, Iran, Russia, China to have this land, or do you want Guyana and the United States to have this land? Where do your loyalties now lie? Because if Venezuela takes it back, they're giving it over to the Chinese. The Chinese oil companies are already down there prospecting illegally. So there's your reality here. So now to the phones we go. Amir, you're going to be up next. Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show.
Hey, how are you doing today?
Great. Welcome.
Okay. Well, just to this point that you just spoke, the Venezuelan people complain and all this. And I'm thinking to myself, what would happen if we just said, you know what, let the Russians have it, let the other ones have it, and, however you guys do, and in the long run, they really think they're going to have much benefit if a China is there and if a Russian is there. After a while, they're going to take over more, they're going to do whatever they do with their economy, crash them, and then they're going to be even worse off. So sometimes the missing of United States somewhere needs to happen just because people need to experience what it is like when there is no us. They always say America is bad. We always put our nose somewhere where we're not supposed to be and all that. And I'm like, you know what, why not we just withdraw out? Let them see it, and let them see 10 years later when China has a whole grip on them, or Russians, are they as much better off than it was when the United States used to be there?
Okay. I'm sympathetic to the argument that give them a dose of their own medicine. That they think we're bad. Let them see the worst part. But here's the problem with that in this real world scenario. Let's take this region of Guyana. You allow the Venezuelans to invade a sovereign nation and take its territory with help of the Chinese, the Russians, and the Iranians. The Venezuelan people already know how bad Maduro is, and yet he continues to rig the polls to get himself elected. We have a massive humanitarian crisis and flight from Venezuela from people. So he gets to hold on to power and stays wealthy, and the people suffer. And then he gets the Chinese, the Russians, and the Iranians to bring in troops. So how do the people throw them out once they're established? So then you have the Chinese, the Russians, and the Iranians having a military foothold in South America near us. And, oh, by the way, don't look now. Haiti is in collapse. Wait for the Chinese, the Russians, and the Iranians to go in together and take care of that situation. And now you're a couple hundred miles from the American southern border with Florida, not to mention Puerto Rico. It cascades very badly if you do that. The further you cascade up and allow a stronghold for these countries hostile to us in the Western Hemisphere, the worse it becomes for us, because the people in those countries, they don't have the firepower to repel them and rebel. We're going to have to either go in and root them out, or it's easier to just not let them get a foothold. It's like kudzu. Now, for those of you outside the South, y'all, those of you listening to Connecticut right now, y'all know I was up in Rhode Island a couple weeks ago, and I got to say, those of you up in Connecticut, WICC, WTIC, y'all, your coastline, I'm in love with it. The rocky coast of New England, I just think is gorgeous. The gray rock sticking out, the waves crashing on it. I actually think I prefer that to the sandy beach. I'm not a beach guy to begin with, but man, it was fantastic. Rhode Island was gorgeous. Y'all up there, though, don't have kudzu. Back before World War II, during the Great Depression, kudzu was introduced as an erosion prevention measure. It's a vine from China. And in the southern United States, it is invasive and takes over and it grows so fast it can cover trees, it covers ground, it takes over everything. You can drive through the South and you will see mounds of kudzu under which are houses. That's how pervasive and invasive kudzu is. And unless you pull it out, because the way it spreads through rhizomes, you've got to pull it completely up. You can't just spray weed killer on it. You have to pull up every section of it. It's like mint. Those of you who spread mint in the yard, you know how invasive mint can be. And it is a pain in the butt to get it out. One of the easiest ways to get rid of kudzu in the South is goats, because goats eat down to the rhizome level, and goats get rid of it. And so there's an entire industry in the South where people rent out goats to eat the kudzu when you're clearing land, because you can clear land to build a house. And if you haven't got the rhizomes, the kudzu's coming back and it's going to overtake your house at some point. So you got to hire the goats to eat it. It's a very wild thing. It's a whole lot easier to just avoid planting the kudzu in the first place. In the same way, it is a whole lot easier to avoid letting the Russians, Chinese, and Iranians establish a military foothold in South America than it is to root them out once they've been there. Because instead of sending goats, you'll be sending American boys, and I would prefer not to do that. So this is all happening because Joe Biden has been weak when it comes to foreign policy. Let us go to the phones here. Ishmael, you're going to be up next. Welcome.
How you doing, Eric?
Good. How are you?
Good. Just kind of maybe a comment or maybe something bringing to everybody's attention to what's going on right now. I was just surfing on TikTok yesterday, and I see somebody post a video saying, go to this website if you're struggling with money if you want to get your green card. And I was like, what? And I was like, let me go try the website. So it's called findhelp.org. And actually it's a loans for green card. I remember 25 years ago when I became a citizen, we didn't have any kind of help. I worked 4 jobs to get my green card. So how is this possible? The government now is giving loans when
essentially they're probably loan sharks. So they're giving you loans. You're going to be indebted to these people in the process of trying to get your green card.
Yes.
Wow. That's wild.
So why is now they're making everybody legal? Because I remember one of the stipulations to become legal, you will have to have a sponsor. Basically, somebody will support yourself, or you were supposed to have money to support yourself when you are on the process.
Yeah,
so
look,
I'm not sure what happened to that.
So my guess, Ishmael, frankly, is that this sounds like a scam to me, because if you get a green card in the United States, you are supposed to have means, and you're supposed to be able to show your means. So my guess, frankly, is that the people going and taking out these loans are getting scammed. I don't know anything about them per se, but I do know that with a green card, you've got to be able to show that you are not going to be on the welfare system, that you have the means to take care of yourself. So you've got to show livelihood and income. And if you show that livelihood and income, then you can get your green card. So you shouldn't have to have a loan to get your green card. And if you're having to take out a loan to do it, it sounds very much like a scam to me, without knowing any other details. But I wouldn't be surprised. There are so many people preying on those who are trying to get citizenship or at least a green card in this country. It wouldn't surprise me. It is Eric Erickson. It's an open line Friday, 877-973-7425. Tracy, you're up next. Welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great, Eric. Quick question about the Trump trial in New York. The judge issued a 50-page document of instructions and then didn't allow the jury to take it into the deliberation room. Why not? I mean, what's the reasoning behind that, or the procedure? Who can remember 50 pages of instruction?
Okay. That's a great question. This isn't that unusual, to be honest with you. And the reason it's not that unusual is because what happens, particularly on a jury where you know there are lawyers on the jury, if you take the written instructions into the jury room with you, then people start arguing over the words in the sentence. Does this sentence mean this, or does this sentence mean that? Well, the comma's here, so maybe it's this. Well, there is no comma, so maybe it's that. So what the judge instructs, and this happens, and I've been on a jury where this happened before, where the judge says, if you have questions, come back to me. So you get the general synopsis that you do take, but you don't get the actual instructions in the jury room. That's not uncommon, and there are people playing it up that it is uncommon. It's not. Judges don't want you going in there and being so obsessed about what you're reading in the rules that you're not actually focused on the case. So if someone has a question and says, "I think I heard that one of the rules did X, Y, and Z," you write a note, send it to the judge, and the judge answers it for you. So it's just not that extraordinary. It's something I haven't made. I made a big deal over the judge. I think some of the instructions were bad. I think some of the instructions were very bad. And I think the judge himself should not have given a partisan donation, and that's disqualifying, and I think something for appeal. But actually saying you can't take the massive pile of instructions with you when you're supposed to be focused on the case, that's not that unusual. And people who are telling you it's highly unusual, I think, are trying to stoke some outrage on your part where there probably shouldn't be any outrage, if that makes sense to you. And again, I haven't been on a lot of juries. Generally, I get out of them by either saying I'm a lawyer or you bring like a Rush Limbaugh book or something and they throw you off the jury. But occasionally, particularly when I was younger and I was a lawyer, I wanted to be on the jury just because I wanted to see what it was like having doing jury trials. And it was not uncommon for the judge not to give you the written instructions when you go back, because they do want you to focus on the case and not the instructions and quibbling over the instructions. All right. The phone number, 877-973-7425. I'm going to go on here in just a minute and take time out so I can do better clock management. I do want to tell you, though, I got a lot of emails from people asking about this whole tooth situation. If you weren't here, I wound up having to leave the show on Wednesday for emergency surgery. In the middle of the show, I had to leave, go have emergency surgery. Yanked out my rear molar and cut out a bunch of tissue from my tooth. I have only just now taken some ibuprofen. That's the only painkiller they want me to take. So I won't be doped up on air. But the talking still encourages bleeding, which they said is normal. They did tell me not to go to the gym today. I was very excited. I don't have to go to the gym this afternoon. But I am doing way much better, and the swelling has gone down. It's sore, but no more swelling. So definitely headed in the right direction. Thanks for asking. Now, I got to tell you about Old Glory Bank. Old Glory Bank is my bank, and in less than 8 minutes online at oldglorybank.com, you can get an account with Old Glory Bank for you or for your kids, and you can get a no-fee checking or no-fee savings account. Unlike pretty much every other online bank in America, you can actually deposit cash at Old Glory Bank. I've done this now twice. So Old Glory Bank has a very innovative app, and you can generate a QR code and take it to one of like 88,000 retail locations around the country, including the CVS by my house. And they scan the QR code at the cash register. You give them the cash, and it gets credited to your account pretty quickly, too, I might add. It's a great thing. I've done it now twice, both times coming back from Las Vegas, bringing cash back from Vegas, and it's just worked. And they're so innovative with their online budgeting tools, with their debit card. And again, no fee checking, no fee savings. They've got competitive interest rates as well. You can even do loans and mortgages. It's a real bank, and it could be your bank too. It's my bank, Old Glory Bank. Go to oldglorybank.com, oldglorybank.com, member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply.
In the time it takes us to say we're making a damn delicious caramel iced coffee with Folgers Instant Coffee, you know we're all about that drizzle. You could be savoring every sip. Damn right. It's Folgers Instant.
Welcome. It's Eric Erickson. This hour of the program brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. Wherever you are in the nation, if you're in charge of a business and your business needs capital to grow, First Liberty might be able to help you. If you need an equipment loan, if you need a loan to buy a building or buy a franchise, those are the things they specialize in. FirstLibertyGA.com. FirstLibertyGA.com. Tell them I sent you. Y'all, it is Open Line Friday, and the phone number is 877-973-7425. Before we move on, a story caught my eye in the Wall Street Journal about now the penalties for using cash. You should know I try never to use cash. I hardly ever carry cash with me anymore. I am a big fan of Apple Pay, where the contactless reader, you just touch your phone and it goes to your credit card. I have a credit card that I just treat it as if it's my bank account. I pay it off every month. I don't like to carry cash. I rarely carry cash anymore. However, cash is legal tender in the United States. And as companies commoditize us and our purchases, I mean, credit card companies these days are willing to sell your purchasing history to companies to target you for advertising. I think that there should be laws that allow people to pay with cash without penalty. So when Noah Kamala recently tried to pay cash for popcorn and a soda, that would be a Coke for those of us in the South, at Yankee Stadium, his almighty dollars struck out. The stadium's concession stands no longer take cash. An employee directed him to a kiosk that could convert his cash into plastic. Kamala, 41 years old, fed $200 into a reverse ATM machine, which subtracted a $3.50 fee and spent out a debit card with a balance of $196.50. Paying for anything in New York is expensive already, said Kamala, who lives in the city. If you add on top of it the extra fees for being able to pay for food, that's not right, he said. Paying with cash used to be the way to get a discount. These days, it can often cost an extra $1 to $6, the sort of transaction fees once limited to swiping a credit card or using an out-of-network ATM. Reverse ATMs are growing in usage around the country. I rarely do I take the position that there ought to be a law. But there ought to be a law prohibiting places from not accepting cash. I think if you want to pay for cash these days. Now, look, I do absolutely find it more convenient to use an Apple Card reader, whether I'm at the airport or at a stadium, at the Brave Stadium, at the teepee. I don't know that they take cash at the teepee these days. But I actually think that states and Congress should prohibit the prohibition on use of cash. It impacts in particular the elderly and the young. Why? Because the young tend to get paid in cash for babysitting gigs, and the elderly tend to more often than not use cash instead of plastic. So we're penalizing the very young and the very old by allowing companies to refuse to take cash, which is legal tender. It is the currency of the United States, and it's the best way to ensure privacy in this country with your shopping transactions. We should, I would encourage every state legislature, and some, by the way, have. Colorado, for example, has passed laws saying you can't prohibit people from paying with cash. Yeah, I'm loath to interfere with the business exchange and the contract right of a business to tell you we don't want to accept cash here. But I think particularly for privacy reasons these days, increasingly, as the credit card, so a company forces you to use plastic, and then the companies that control the plastic sell your purchasing history to others so that they can commoditize you and advertise to you. I think we should say cash is legal tender. It should be valid everywhere. Look, this is becoming a privacy issue for me. People don't always want their purchases to be known. And you can say it's for nefarious reasons, but very often it's simply because they're private people. They don't want you knowing whether they're buying cornflakes or Frosted Flakes. They don't want you to know it, so let them pay in cash. And particularly the young and the elderly are the least likely to use plastic and the most likely to use cash, and you're penalizing the young and the elderly. The people just getting started in life and the people who've retired, let them use cash. It's legal tender in the United States. It says on the dollar bills, legal tender. It should be accepted everywhere. And I used to not have that position. This is something I've changed on over time. I used to not care about it at all. And in fact, I am one of those people who doesn't like to use cash at all. I don't have a single dollar in my wallet right now. But concurrent to that, as people are being commoditized by advertising industries, the credit card companies and more, I'm more and more mindful it has become a privacy issue. And for privacy's sake, people should be allowed to pay with cash. Maybe not send it through the mail to pay your bills, checks or credit cards for that. But on hand at a retail location, you should be able to pay with cash. And just because the cashiers are too stupid these days to make change, you got a cash register can tell you how to make the change. You don't even have to do the math in your head. So let people use cash and have their privacy back.